Hi, Peter. Much excitement in the property market at the moment.
Hi, Michelle. Yes, I think very few of us slept last night.
So let's talk about what is happening. There have been these new directions that were published yesterday, and they speak to the ability of limited circumstances when tenants and new homeowners are able to have a once-off movement for relocation purposes.
That's correct, Michelle. Just like what we did last time, let's have a look and actually read through the regulations itself, because let's not draw any inferences. Let's have a look at what the directions or directives actually state. In the purpose section of these new directions, it states, the purpose of these directions is to facilitate the movement of persons and goods within and across provincial, metropolitan, or district boundaries during the period of Alert Level 4. So we've already got that. It's only during Alert Level 4. The movement of persons and goods where new lease agreements were entered into before or during the lockdown period, or the transfer of immovable property occurred before the lockdown period. It requires a change in place of residence, including the transport of goods to a new place of residence within the Republic.
So it speaks a lot to what the lockdown period is. So in terms of the tenant-landlord relationship, tenants and landlords can therefore move and relocate if a lease agreement was entered into before or during the lockdown period, or new homeowners can move if a transfer of immovable property happened before the lockdown period. What then is the lockdown period?
Interesting question, Michelle. The lockdown period was actually defined in the original regulations that we received on the Disaster Management Act. And what it specifically states is the lockdown period means from the 26th of March to the 30th of April. So it will only apply to lease agreements entered into before the 30th of April, or a transfer of property occurred prior to the lockdown period, because properties could obviously not be transferred during lockdown.
Okay, so these tenants and homeowners that now want to move, they need a permit. Where do they get the permit from?
100% correct. It's very important to note that the permit can only be issued by a station commander or his designated person at a police office. So that means the party that needs to get a permit, the tenant now in this instance, or the new homeowner, would need to go to the police station and get a permit from the station commander or his designated representative.
And what would they need to take with them to the police station in order for the police to qualify that they are in a position to sign off on this permit?
Michelle, it's vital that they take along the number and the people that they are going to be moving or relocating during this time period, as well as their obviously ID documentation to prove that they're the person that the new lease agreement, they must take that along as well as the old lease agreement. So the lease agreement that is going to end during or before this time period, as well as the lease agreement that was entered into before the 30th of April. That is what the requirements are. So it's the people, proper identification, and both lease agreements need to be taken along.
And one imagines that they also then, in terms of these directions, need to have all that documentation on their persons during the actual relocation, when they're actually moving.
That's 100% correct, Michelle. So you'll need the permit, as well as all the previously before mentioned items that we said. So lease agreements are absolutely vital. They will not grant a permit if your lease agreement does not comply to the restrictive conditions indicated in the directives.
And then let's talk a little bit about the move itself, or the relocation itself. When the tenant or the new homeowner is moving, can they now make use of furniture removal companies? Because initially, in the initial essential services list, furniture removal companies were not included.
100% correct, Michelle. In terms of these new directives, specifically under that same section, purpose, under C, the transport of goods within the Republic is permitted in terms of Regulation 22(1)F. And 22(1)F speaks to removal companies being able to relocate persons and the transport of goods during this time period. So yes, it would be allowed to get a moving service to move your things.
So now I've got a permit, I've got my furniture removal company, and I arrive at the new premises. How am I getting into my new premises, Peter?
Michelle, this is where we're having a problem at this point in time. Because if we're having a look at the regulations don't specifically speak to essential services and what landlords and estate agents may do during this time period of relocation. All that we can do at this point in time is draw inferences from current legislation as well as reading that with the new directives. And what it specifically states in terms of the Rental Housing Act is that prior to occupation, a landlord and a tenant must jointly inspect the premises prior to the tenant taking occupation of the premises. There's also a corollary provision in terms of the Rental Housing Act relating to outgoing inspections also needing to be done in quite a similar manner. So if we're reading both of those pieces of legislation together, the directives as well as the Rental Housing Act, it looks as if landlords and thus an estate agent, because they are the duly authorized representative of the landlord, would be entitled or able to assist the tenant in doing the incoming or outgoing inspection as well as the handover of keys. But that's what we're reading into the current legislation. Remember, we're not seeing that in the directives itself because they don't speak to that relationship. They don't speak to the landlord-tenant relationship.
So then it doesn't specifically make an estate agent an essential service in this regard. If I understand you correctly, what we're saying is in order for the relocation to take effect, the tenant would need the keys of the premises in order to move into the property. The landlord would be in a position to hand over the keys. The agent may be working on the landlord's behalf in terms of the Rental Housing Act. And while the handover of keys is taking place, an incoming or outgoing inspection could take place. But for these very limited circumstances for where these relocation directives have been granted.
That's exactly correct, Michelle. And I think it's so important that you just said that. This does not mean that estate agents are now classified as essential services. They can't go out and do normal businesses functioning during this time period. It's only in these limited circumstances. And it's vitally important to note that very good social distancing measures should be taken, as well as PPEs or protectional personal equipment as per the regulations must be worn at all times. That includes your face mask. Please take care of yourselves, wear gloves, especially when you're meeting other people, when you're busy providing for these services that is going to occur during this relocation period. And remember, as previously stated, this relocation period is very defined. It's only from the 7th of May until the 7th of June that people can relocate. That's what we've got currently.
So Peter, estate agents then wouldn't be in a position, or even landlords, wouldn't be in a position to show viewings of the property to potential new tenants. So that's off the list. The regulations or the directions for this relocation also then don't really speak to what happens in the event of a tenant having vacated the property during the actual lockdown, so between the 26th of March and the 30th of April, leaving the keys with the security and now wanting their deposit back. What happens in that instance with regards to outgoing inspections?
With regards to that outgoing inspection specifically, Michelle, estate agents are not an essential service, so they cannot perform the functions of an essential service during this time period. That means that those specific inspections that need to be done where the tenant has already vacated during the lockdown period, they won't be entitled to go and do the inspection now and perform those functions of an inspection. What they'll need to do is hold on to the deposit for this time period, still retain it. And once new regulations have been drafted that opens up the industry for the estate agent to perform those functions or the landlord to perform those functions, then the inspection can be done, but not before this time period. It's also important here to note, and I think there were two questions in that question once again, is that tenants that vacated during the lockdown period and are signing new lease agreements now to take occupation of premises, they're not entitled to take occupation of those premises itself. Remember that new lease agreement is entered into after the lockdown period. It's only relating to the lease agreements that were entered into during the lockdown period, so before the 30th of April. Yes.
So I think in closing, Peter, I mean, these are very exciting new directions for the property market. And it speaks to the fact that we're slowly seeing relief within the property market. First, we had the ability for people to move between provinces, municipalities, and districts for the purposes of getting back to their place of residence between the 1st and the 7th of May. And now we're having further relief allowing relocation for a very limited sector of the market. And in my mind, that speaks to the fact that we don't want mass movement. It speaks to the fact that government is looking to slowly open the market up, and that we shouldn't extend our movement as estate agents and landlords beyond what relief has been provided for in this specific relocation directions.
That's correct, Michelle. If we don't adhere strictly to the new directives, we're going to keep on extending our lockdown periods. We're going to keep on extending the alert levels because more and more people will get infected. Once again, it's vitally important. If a situation arises that this can occur, this specific relocation can occur, everybody involved must take care of themselves when it comes to PPEs, when it comes to good social distancing protocol. This does not mean that everything is relaxed. We're seeing soft relaxations in certain areas, specifically when it comes to now the relocation. Please don't take the law into your own hands. Continue doing what you're currently busy doing. We're still, remember, in the alert level 4. That hasn't relaxed. Merely a very, very singular situation is spoken to here with regards to tenants and new landowners, that their transfer has occurred prior to the end of lockdown, as well as lease agreements entered into prior to the end of lockdown.
Very exciting, Peter. I'm very excited for the property market. I like this slow opening. And so we'll keep our members posted as new developments occur, as we have been doing during this very difficult time.
Of course. Thanks, Michelle. And just to end off from my side, please remember TPN Legal is there available for you guys. So please contact us on the normal office line on 0861 876 000, as well as popping us through an email at legal@tpn.co.za. Have a fantastic day, everybody.
Cheers. Thanks.